So, now tell me something about this whole ecosystem you're operating in. There is a certain level of maturity that's there and that's evolving pretty quickly as well. The talent supply in the ecosystem is still in early days as far as the depth and concern across, especially the subjects like MarTech and CRM, which is the core subject of our attention. That's a classic state of retention marketing, right? What is your impression of the maturity of the different markets you operate in? And you can pick up one, whichever is your favorite, and we probably go a little bit into each of these geographies.
Sure. For sure, UAE is more mature when it comes to digital as compared to Saudi. And Saudi, as we all know, is the next big thing in terms of transformation.
Sure.
And one thing, probably a couple of insights which would be interesting for the viewers would be like UAE or like Middle East generally is a very app heavy market, right?
Mm-hmm.
So unlike the West or unlike like Eastern markets where web experiences are actually almost as good as the app experiences, and web usually has 40-50% of the business share.
Mm-hmm.
It's unlike that in the region where most of the businesses, even if you look at the most mature digital businesses like Landmark, like almost an $11 billion conglomerate in the region,
Right.
or if you look at a small business which is doing about half of it or one fourth of it, you would see a common denominator, which is app, right? If a business has an app, their contribution for revenue is sitting at 80-85%. And this contribution even looks higher in Saudi. If you were to look only in Saudi Arabia, it goes up to 90%, right? So that's an interesting thing for a marketer because right from performance to CRM, the channels that you're using, the communication that is going out, the way the product teams are structured, everything changes by being app first, right?
Sure.
So that's one like interesting insight. And I think it's just evolving, continuously evolving in the last 4 or 5 regions. 4 or 5 years.
Sure. And in terms of the whole maturity on CRM practices, you said UAE is more mature. Is this because it started off in this journey sooner? There is a larger talent pool available, people who have, let's say, come from different parts of the world to now bring slightly advanced practices. What's your lens on why is this the way it is?
Well, I think you said it correctly because firstly, like the population percentage, if you look at the split, 90% are expats, 10% are locals. And within that, you would have a lot of expats coming in from India. India is the number one expat population, followed by UK and other like European plus South Asian countries. So these are digitally matured markets as compared to UAE, right? So when this talent pool comes in, they bring their own set of like experience, tooling, and hence like from a maturity perspective, UAE has been able to kind of become a lot more mature in a faster way as compared to Saudi. And Saudi is undergoing that wave at the moment.
So if I were to put the state of retention maturity in terms of just the people's practices, which they're able to take live in their product experiences and consumer journeys, if India were to be on a scale of 1 to 10, at let's say 10, just to kind of index the benchmarking, where would you rate some of these markets from the Middle East region?
I would say UAE is probably a 6, going into 7 soon. Saudi would be like around 3 to 4. And I think the other countries are pretty much in the same range in GCC, in the Saudi range.
In the Saudi range. So would that mean a certain level of opportunity for sell-through to actually pay greater attention to these markets where the whole evolution is yet to happen and you can help accelerate that?
Exactly, right. So Ankur, what I'm doubling down on is like, for me, offering CRM and having that early mover advantage means working very closely with partners like WebEngage, having a very strong relationship, and then collectively foreseeing the challenges that the customers will face in the next 12 months in the regions like Saudi and other developing areas, and catering them with like products or services or solutions that you foresee, right? So for example, one good example would be Saudi is such an interesting market where you would get like, some business reaches out and you're like, okay, sure, let me Google this business. What do they do? You will find a website which is half baked. There is no alignment of UI, UX, checkout process is very cumbersome. And then you go check, they have like 800 stores. We're like, but what's going on, right? Like their website is not functioning correctly, but they have 800 stores, right? So with 800 stores, you can imagine the data that they're sitting on, the footfall that's coming in, the number of offline customers. They must be operating for the last 10, 15 years, right? So in that sense, now if you change this problem statement into the potential opportunity, both for you guys and for us, where these guys, they want to go through the digital transformation.
Sure.
They want to use their first party data.
Hmm.
They want to create omni-channel experiences. They want their customers offline to move online and have an app and start making purchases online or omni-channel to increase the purchase frequency of the business and so on. But they don't know how, right? So
But
these
these questions
people,
are already there. The awareness for the category, that the fact that they need it and this kind of business impact will come, and they're prepared to make that commercial investment, because it's not just about one time getting a software and buying it, right? There's also this entire technology piece that has to come together, the entire data that has to get unified. So from that, let's say acceptance and maturity of the demand itself, the ask itself, is that something you see very aggressively shaping, that they're asking on the right questions, and now it's a matter of time where the answers will also come in and it'll evolve.
correct. So I've seen like most of the businesses that we get through reference or our own network, they're
Mhm.
speaking the right language, they're asking the right questions. So they're asking like, we need omni-channel marketing solution. That's a good
Sure.
question to ask. At least it's
Mhm.
in the room. Then there are like, we are sitting on 2 million email addresses. What do we do about this? How do we get these people to download the app, right?
Sure.
So the questions are coming in the right direction, and I think
Hmm.
also because of lot of like the transformation, foreign direct investments coming in, the sports media industry picking it up, the physical infrastructure and the digital infrastructure has no other option than to be transformed at the same pace,
Sure.
right? Which means the people who are involved in the process, like if a shop owner who never had any digital presence, if a person comes in and is like, do you give your first time discount on your app? Then it just triggers that thought process,
Sure.
right? Immediately. So I think that's what is going on. And obviously, we want to double down on our efforts in Saudi.
So one of the things we've seen happen in India is the UX expectation of a consumer is substantially benchmarked against the global experiences. The Netflix and the Amazons end up having a certain level of UX, a certain level of user journey, certain level of personalization. And that sets the bar for an Indian consumer to expect the same from any other app that he interacts with. What's your lens on consumer expectation in Saudi? And that might just create a differentiation play, because a brand which is very responsive to consumer needs versus a brand which is not so responsive to consumer needs, obviously the winning path will be with the first one. So is this also a strong pull in favor of digital transformation? Like you just said, somebody wants a first time discount in the app. What would they mean? Is that a pull?
It is, I think, other thing is because of this FDI, right? A lot of um, foreign talent, venture
Hmm.
capitalists, venture funds are being set up, right? What that leads to is the benchmarking against the global players, right? If
Right.
a business is set up who's looking to raise investments, the investor
Hmm.
will come and say, like, who are you aspiring to be?
Sure.
What is the problem you're solving, right?
Hmm.
When you say a name out, like we are aspiring to be the Paytm of the region, or like the
Sure.
Netflix of the region, or Shopify of the region, you
Hmm.
already are giving a benchmark which which you expect the customer to benchmark you against.
Hmm.
So in that sense, like I think businesses, we are seeing a lot of growth for like a couple of my friends in my network. They have UI UX agencies,
Sure.
and they can't keep up with the
Of
demand,
course. Yeah.
right? So that's just like goes back to your question of like, our business is only focusing on just putting a website out there, or they are focusing on putting a website which caters and is thought through from a UI UX perspective to give a great customer experience on site and on the app.
So, from a conviction, which is then linked to the commitment and investment appetite to make all of these things happen, right? Because some of these things are very hard to do in a very legacy first organization, which is still less than convinced about the impact of digital, right? I mean, people organizationally, the way traditional organizations are built, they could create a department or a set of people or hire somebody from outside or just give somebody a charter to run the whole digital first kind of practice. What's the pattern you're seeing? How do enterprises, let's say somebody who's got 800 offline stores, when he's setting up his first digital platform, is he giving the entire thing to an agency? Guys, go build it for me. I have the money, but I don't know how to do this. Or will he hire some people who will have probably relevant experience? Or how is this shaping out? Are there patterns to see?
Uh, it's a mix of both, right? There
Sure.
is no definitive answer to that. Like, uh, what we've seen is like it's about like the traditional retailers. They don't have the digital knowledge themselves. Right? So for me, going out and hiring a CA or a finance guy when I'm a digital person, it just doesn't make sense. Right? So the same thing with there. Like what we have seen is they end up hiring people in certain roles, but they're not really sure if I've hired for performance or if I've hired for entire digital, and what does it even mean, the
Sure.
difference between the two, right? So agencies, consultants, like the big consulting firms, all of them, then they start to fill up the gaps in
Hmm.
knowledge and resources. And players like yourself and other competitors in the same space, events that are happening, the awareness that is being created, all of that, like small things are adding up where, going back to my previous point, the right questions are being asked,
Hmm.
right? So if the right questions are being asked, then it trickles down from there where you start thinking, like if I'm speaking about omni-channel, there is performance, there is CRM, there is marketing automation, there is NPS, there is so many different things.
Sure.
Now let me see if I have the talent for one, two, three, or somebody who can do two of this, somebody who can do one of them, right? So
Sure.
then it becomes easy for the businesses to take a decision like, I got this two, like people in my team who can deliver on XYZ
Hmm.
sections
Hmm.
of the business, but for others, I need to, for short term, get someone externally, right? So I feel like it's a good problem to have for businesses as long as it's headed in the right direction.
You know what we've seen happen, and there's a lot of very large organizations in India which are going through a journey of digital transformation. Some of these efforts are very committed with conviction that I'm going to put one very serious and well invested guy at the top with a decent amount of budget, and I'll allow him to build a bit of a disjoint organization because the legacy mindset is the first blocker. Because every increment investment you need to make, if it has to justify ROI and answer all those questions very frequently, the way traditional business people are supposed to think, it slows you down. And a lot of times it's also a recipe of failure. So we've seen very wholehearted efforts, which are, let's say, the Adani group that we work with, or let's say the Angel Broking group, which have traditional companies but have transformed their digital mechanism very aggressively by pretty much putting like 1,000 people team as a dedicated unit, which is not intersecting on an everyday basis with the MENA organization. It's actually a different city, a different corporate office, a different leader that's running that piece. So and what we've seen also happen on the other side is slightly half-hearted slash mixed attempts where you'll carve out a set of people who are otherwise traditional but are now wearing the digital hat and they're trying to do something. It's not their fault, but the fact is that this becomes much harder to do within the context of the larger organization. So in this set of choices that are being made in the region, you see some people now like, okay, I need to do this. I'm convinced at the top level. I'm going to put $5 million. I'm going to get this guy at the top and he'll run the show for me. Is that the level of conviction and commitment you see happening in some examples?
Uh, for sure, I think some of the big groups they've
Mm-hmm.
started having like transformation teams. You would be interestingly seeing on LinkedIn roles which are digital transformation consultant, digital transformation manager, and so on. And the central team, which then overlooks transformation independently and reports directly into the management. We're seeing more and more of that coming up in the bigger groups, as you're
Sure.
saying. And I think it's also a factor of like, at some point, the business owners they need to start trusting other people, especially
Hmm.
in the domains where they don't have knowledge themselves, right?
Sure.
It's a very like it's a chicken and egg problem in the region where traditionally retail, it's a small Dubai or UAE is a small country, right?
Sure.
So what do people do? People go out in the malls, and it's always been the case, right? Like
Hmm.
e-commerce just picked up in the last few years,
Yeah.
but traditionally retail, malls, etc., have been the bread and butter, right?
Yeah.
And if you think from a retail perspective, there is just so much you can do from a VM perspective.
Oh, absolutely.
You at a high level know that this mall will attract these many people. This is an average footfall. These many people will walk into my store. Either I make profit or I make loss, but this is the range.
Sure.
For you, decision making is a lot more quicker. If
Hmm.
it doesn't work out in 6 months, you can shut down, move to a different store, and you know what to expect,
Sure.
right? So, but when these people who are used to this ecosystem, which we spoke about for too
Right.
long, they've
Hmm.
been doing this for 10, 15, 20 years, they go into ecom, they start losing money in the first year. Then you
Sure.
start explaining them like, there's the cost of acquiring a customer. And then over a period of 1 year, if he purchases three, four times with you, then you're going to start making profit and blah, 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 right? It becomes sometimes honestly, it
Alien
sounds like a
language,
just
right?
alien language and sounds like a justification for your like underperformance in a way.
Yep.
So that level of maturity is now picking up where people have
Hmm.
realized like digital cannot be or ecom cannot be profitable day one. If
Sure.
you're running ecom, you have to think of one extra incremental source of income which will turn profitable over a period of time.
Hmm.
That
Hmm.
requires maturity, that requires upfront investment, right?
Hmm.
So going, yeah, I think on your question, like now we are seeing more and more of groups,
Hmm.
like the retail heavy groups, like likes of Landmark, likes of
Yeah.
Alputame, Altair, Alshaya, and so on, building that central transformation teams to take the entire group through that transformation journeys.
So to me, that's also interesting from a lens since you mentioned these are smaller geographies, right? The target audience you have is finite, which means their attention span is also going to be so much. The dollar value, the fight for that dollar, the share of market will also remain an ongoing one. And the ones who drive a certain level of repeat and engagement are taking that away from somebody else, right?
For sure. I think it's a very valid question, which I think after a certain period of operating business in the region, you start like asking, like what's going on, right? Like why is the drop purchase frequency, etc., coming down,
Hmm.
especially with continuous, like international players continuously entering the market. It's just becoming more and more difficult for the local players. So I think my main like thought process around this has always been where I've told my previous bosses that stop treating retention as a marketing problem and start treating retention as a business problem, right? Because no matter if you have the right tooling in place, if you
Hmm.
have the right segmentation, right channel mix, etc., if you have CRM nailed down, basically, right,
Right.
still your business can keep going down, your repeat can
Hmm.
keep going down, right? And going back into the customer experience, if first time you made a purchase and the wrong item got delivered or the item had an issue and refund took longer than expected and the person had to call the support team 3 4 times to wait for 30 minutes and so on, there is
Right.
no kind of communication from a marketing sense which can build up or make up for that experience, right?
Sure.
So
Absolutely.
it's important, like right from day one, you're looking at the entire funnel. You have
Hmm.
your CRM setup, you have your NPS setup, which is consistently collecting the customer feedback across different parts of the funnel, whether it's a post purchase NPS, whether it's a post refund, post delivery, etc. And you feed that information into the relevant departments within the company, right? So that loop needs to be completed from day one. You can't rush into thinking that marketing is the growth lever, let me go, and then retention is a, or CRM is a retention
Afterthought.
lever, let me go towards that. And then you
Hmm.
come to the third piece, right? So I think businesses who have looked at the entire experience from A to Z have generally seen a better retention. And it's not a it is a discount driven market, but at the same time convenient. People usually are okay in paying extra for convenience, which
Sure.
means like if you give a good experience, they're going to keep coming back, right?
Hmm.
So that's what like the companies in the region should strive for.
So, in some sense, the whole full stack ownership of retention is not just with the marketer who's running campaigns, it's also with the rest of the organization from a servicing lens, from a support lens, from a product experience lens, from a catalog lens. Do you see this manifesting in terms of just having the seat on the table for the chief retention officer? You know, it's a conversation we ask, it's a question we ask here and there every once in a while because it rolls up to the CMO invariably. CMO has the acquisition team and the retention team, and they both look at life in marketing world. This guy does not necessarily have the ability to poke a finger at catalog or category or services or operations that you guys are messing up retention. And this is what you need to solve for. So at an organization level, unless it gets driven a little bit top down, it doesn't become effective. And that's what I was trying to understand that have you seen success versus failure being determined by these kind of attention spans?
Yeah, for sure. I think usually retention is now being treated as an independent function where it's not like a product ownership or a customer support ownership. It's just like a separate, as I said, like it's a
Hmm.
separate, just like we discussed the transformation piece, which was more of a central function.
Sure.
Here, it's not really central, it's still within marketing, but it has the ability and flexibility to go and look at different areas within the business outside of marketing and pinpoint, as you said, that your waiting time on support is this, or like 30% of the customers who gave me an NPS post delivery are not happy, given me a 3 rating or a detractor, right? And here is the reason for this.
Sure.
So it's just becoming more and more of a norm where people have, especially post COVID, when the investment scene has dried up, profitability all of a sudden has become the number
Hmm.
one KPI, sustainable profitability, right? So in that sense, like retention is just bigger than ever, and obviously the CEOs, the CMOs, all of them are treating this as a top priority at the moment.
A very fun, simple question. I know from a, let's say, beauty products company out of India, a fairly large one there. They had a situation where one of the new products they launched and had a large amount of inventory for had a terrible NPS. Now, option A, continue shipping. Option B, throw all of that inventory away because it's terrible NPS. And this is a retention question, right? But it's a retention question which has implications for other departments and places to solve for. Do you think something similar is possible to happen, that this kind of questions will come up and the lipstick will get thrown away?
Very, very interesting. So, when you say NPS is bad, do you mean like the
People
product
hate the
quality?
product. The people
People
hate the
hate the
product.
product.
They don't repeat any further.
Uh, I mean, use it as a giveaway, man, if you want to. Like, there's
But that still hurts the
you.
brand, right? Because for a lot of brands, and I've seen this as experiences, people who try to, let's say, get rid of inventory by giving it to potential customers, and if it's a terrible experience, you're probably worse off.
Especially in the skincare category, right? Like it's very sensitive. If a product has some sort of allergy or something else, I'd rather burn the inventory, right? Like then just killing out because the virality or the potential of bad negative reviews going viral is always going to be higher than the good ones, right? So as a business, I
So
don't
the
think you
review
can afford
lens,
that risk.
sure. The part I would love to double click on is that the retention marketer is flagging that I've got terrible reviews or reports on this. Does he have the seat on the table to be able to ask the catalog team to get rid of this inventory by burning it and not trying to sell this or liquidate it to existing customers, right? Because what tends to
Uh,
happen is
yeah.
this is a simple acquisition led play. You will always have more customers buying that for the first time. So you have no idea really because you see the sales ramping up. It's a new product. You have discounts running. So you have a lot of sales happening. So month on month, you see that this number is growing. I'm selling more of this lipstick. So it must be doing well and I should order more. On the other side, you just don't necessarily pay attention to the stat. This is actually not working out because the people who are buying this are not repeating. So that's where the retention guy comes in and says, hey guys, while of course you see growth, but this is all bad growth because these are not coming back. So that's where I'm just trying to understand that organizationally and from a authority and power positions, because where we've seen some of these failure points is because the retention guy reports to the CMO, who's 90% experience in stories acquisition. And now suddenly he's like, okay, I need attention on the subject, but he's not able to get.
Uh, it's a data problem, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if that leads to a 5% less retention over a period of 1 year, what would that transform into
Huge,
value,
right?
right? So if that value is big enough, then it's like, Jeff Bezos from Amazon says that you need to build a culture where the smallest employee in the company or the youngest employee in the company should have the ability to override the CEO himself if he has more data,
If he
right?
has the
So
right
I think,
evidence.
yeah, that's the like nobody can question data, right? So I've seen this personally when I've been in meetings with the chairman of like groups that I work
Mm-hmm.
for. If you go prepared with data, usually they will listen to you, right?
Fair
Usually
enough.
they will. So that's the approach. I think, as you said, like acquisition, CMO's role is overall at acquisition as well as overall retention,
Sure.
right? So breaking your top line, there is just so much acquisition. Let's say 50% of the business comes through new customers and 50%
Mm-hmm.
comes through retention. That's over a period of 1 year. So you can't really look at like short term and be like, for the next 2 months, my acquisition is high, but for the remainder of 8 months or 10 months, my retention is going to be 10% down. Right. So that's a data problem. And I think if you approach it from that perspective, uh, you will objectify the problem and you'll get the answer that you need.
And you'll hopefully get the stakeholders to align with the goals.